So this week we're going to be taking a deep dive into my review of the Chrono Odyssey playtest that just took place and find out whether it truly is that next generation MMO to break the cycle of shitty pay-to-win MMOs. I'm going to give you my unfiltered opinion on what I actually think worked and what I think could use some work, what I didn't like, and issues that I came across in the game. But without rambling on anymore, let's just jump right into the video. So what exactly is Chrono Odyssey for those who don't actually know, which I imagine most do, but if you don't, Chrono Odyssey is a dark fantasy MMO action RPG that's been developed by Chrono Studio and published by Cacao Studios. It was due to release at the end of the year on PC, Xbox and PlayStation according to Cacao's investor meetings. Now, it kind of doesn't make sense to do a review on a smaller channel like mine, obviously I'm grown but it is smaller, without giving you a background of where I'm coming from and who I am as a gamer. I'm a veteran MMO player who started with Runescape back in the day when old school Runescape was the only Runescape we had. Over the years I've continued to play MMOs and RPGs heavily, but for a while I did stop playing the genre to instead jump into survival games, as I didn't feel MMOs that were currently around, I would say, were hardcore enough and didn't really fit my playstyle, and it was just kind of pay to win garbage or log on and you're getting rewarded for literally just opening up the game. That really doesn't work for me. I instead jumped into games such as Ark Survival Evolved, Atlas and Conan, where the gameplay was constant and there's always something new happening or to do with a group of players and a lot of freedom and a lot of communication, and that's kind of what I like, that guild type group based competitive play. I have, however, now been coming back towards MMOs lately more heavily, so I am a semi-hardcore to hardcore gamer. I do work, I do have a family, so I am very committed and I do run a semi-hardcore guild with semi-hardcore players. As well as that, I am heavily involved in PvP, but I am a PvX player, and without PvE I don't think the PvP works. Let's just jump into the actual review and the systems from Chrono Odyssey. So jumping into the combat, which obviously is something we need to talk about. The combat within Chrono Odyssey is action combat. I played as a swordsman for most of the beta, which in retrospect was the least powerful class in my honest opinion. I found the combat to be quite reactive and responsive apart from one of the skills, and I found that the combat is very skill based, especially with dodging and parrying. So for those coming from only tab combat MMOs, I do think they're gonna struggle a little bit, but that's to be expected, and it's something that we'll learn as you play the game. Once you get a grasp for the timing and your dodges and building up your rage to use your skills, the combat seems to flow quite nicely in my honest opinion, and I like how rather than painting massive targets on the floor to telegraph the attacks, you have to pay attention to the mobs you were fighting and keep an eye on the animations to know what they're gonna do next. So I did genuinely have fun with the combat in the game, and I actually like this combat more than tag target. Honestly, when it comes to tab target, I kind of think it's a bit redundant, but that's just my opinion. I'm kind of a bit bored of it. I want something a bit more challenging and engaging, and that's where I actually feel like BDO's combat is probably better, or even hybrids like Guild Wars and definitely Ashes when you're using the fighter. Now, if you've played games like Elden Ring or Dark Souls, you'll take this combat a lot easier than most will. It feels very rewarding when you do get all the timings right and beat the bosses, as they're not designed to be easy early game. So one problem I did find with the combat was getting stuck in animations. Now, I don't think it was a huge deal, as you just had to prepare better and keep more of an eye on what the enemy was doing, but it may be an issue for those who are not used to these type of games, and when you press to use one of your skills, it does lock you into that animation till it's ended, meaning you can't dodge and move away from the enemy attacks while you're doing the skill. In my opinion, we could do with the dodge cancelling the animation of the skill, even if that means you don't do the damage of the skill. So if they just tweak that, which isn't a hard tweak, I actually think the combat for a beta version that needs a little bit of work is actually fairly decent, and I was actually quite happy with it. But I do see a lot of people using the wrong classes, and in hindsight I think Berserker would probably be better for me. Ranger's not really for me. I think it was too overpowered and definitely needs nerfed. But yeah, I really did like the combat, and I think it's got substance. Not sure why everyone's hating on it. I think it was way over the top, and I genuinely think people need to give feedback and give it a bit more time. So So coming to the core of the gameplay loop that we kind of seen in the beta, but obviously it's not the full core gameplay loop because we just don't have that yet. When it comes to the core gameplay loop, I think this is where we saw some of the struggles over the beta weekend. Now, this isn't due to an issue on Chrono Studios' part, it's more on the side of people playing it. The gameplay loop is currently centered around defeating the bosses within Chrono Gate, but it's not your typical MSQ, so Main Story Quest, where you go from quest to quest to quest. You're meant to go out and explore between Chrono Gates and level up and get more powerful gear to defeat these bosses. What I tended to see was people going into these as low level as possible to try and blast through what they'd classify as the MSQ, and in this game it's just not possible. It's not designed to be played that way, and I think it's great that they designed the game in a way so you can't just pass through the MSQ to get to the end game, especially the first time you come to the Chrono Gate to face the 1000-fold piercer. You're actually supposed to lose, and I think this confused a lot of people as they're so used to MMOs that hold their hand throughout the entire game and tell them where they need to go every second and how they need to do things, and then make things potentially easy so it's not too stressful and they don't leave the game. Now, the gameplay loop I found worked best was to come into the game, get the first Chrono Gate, fail it, and then rather than give up and call the game terrible, you then went and explored all the side quests, bounties and repeatable content within that area to level up and get stronger gear that even included farming out actual resources for what was the best gear at that level. Doing the repeatable content like time gates, labyrinths, solo dungeons was some of the most rewarding, as each time you did it you could easily see yourself becoming more powerful as you progressed through it faster, and I enjoyed the core gameplay loop, and I think as we see more of the world opened up, it'll just become ever better as they add more group content. So at the moment that was kind of where the game lacked, I'm not gonna lie, but there's more group content coming, you know, with the raids and other things in Eden. And you've also got to think this was a server test more than a full gameplay test and build that was months and months old, which they've already addressed. According to them, there is a future build where a lot of these bugs and issues are fixed, but I think they wanted to just gather more and more data on this build so then they could tweak it for the next build, and that's highly likely the next beta test will do. And honestly, I think they needed to test. This was the first proper multiplayer test, and I think it went really well. That's just my opinion. I'm looking at it logically and not emotionally. I'm not saying this is going to be a 10-year MMO or a 2-year MMO. I am just looking at the beta, basing it off what a beta is, basing it off what they've said. And remember, I was one of the people when I originally heard about this had written it off, but it was one of the members in the Discord that kept talking about it that actually got me to double look at it, and I'm kind of glad I did now. So let's talk about progression. Progression in the game was very easy to follow. You had your weapon mastery that leveled as you used it, which I thought worked well, and it allowed you to level up the skills and weapons you wanted to use. There was a lot of choice within the skill trees, to the point where we had a lot of guild members playing the same class but playing it quite differently. Like we had two berserkers, one was going for a crit build and the other was going for just higher and higher damage, and both worked and could be used in the hardest content, which was the Howling Pit dungeon. Respecking was easy in the game, as you could give and take away points at any time to rebuild yourself into different builds, which I think is needed, as when you progress and learn the class and the way you want to play the class, it'll probably be different to what you first choose. Gear upgrades were also fairly easy to follow too, as the gear was split between 2 crafting benches rather than 4 or 5, as we've seen in some other MMOs. You had your armor workbench and your weapon workbench. Your gear progress based on levels. Green and grey could be used at the start, blue was for level 15, purple was for level 25, and orange was some of the best gear at level 40. Each tier of armor had at least 6 sets, 2 light, 2 medium and 2 heavy, with more being able to be found in the world, and when crafted they had RNG on what the stats and buffs you would get off them, giving a good replay loop for getting that exact stats you wanted. I really liked how they did the system. It was simple, yet it gave a lot of players freedom in how they wanted to build the class, and I know the plan was to add more sets into the game as the development progresses, or we get other betas or the actual launch. There's a lot more there, but it was quite limited in the beta for obvious reasons. Like all other betas, they just won't give us all of the content. I would also have gotten into the classes here, but I think I'm gonna save that for another video. So let's quickly jump into the economy of the game, as I don't think for the beta beta, it was fully implemented. There's no player-to-player trading within Chrono Odyssey, which I think is a good choice to reduce how easy it is to buy and sell gold. There is, however, an auction house, and what I liked about the auction house was they had set a minimum price for items, meaning nobody could reduce the prices of rare stuff to an extremely small amount of gold. And when you did put something up on the market, there was a timer till it went up on sale. This is something though that's gonna have to be watched, especially with bottom, as we all saw what happened with the market in New World. It was absolutely shafted multiple times and really destroyed the economy. The gold within the game was pretty easy to get, and I like how you used it when crafting and processing, as it gave the gold something to be used for, and the shops were quite limited in the game to only having low tier of items available and some limited items that could only be bought a few times. This may change, and I think it probably will. I think it's because we're in the beta and other towns further into the game will offer more, and as you level or complete stories, more stuff will unlock or quests and whatnot. But I do like how they made it so crafting is an integral part of the game, and if you want higher tier portions of food, you can craft them or buy them from other players in the auction house rather than buying them from the vendor. It makes those who want to PvE and gather as a way to endgame a good replay loop. It makes this a viable gameplay loop, as some people may not want to spend the time getting materials to craft the armor, or may just want to buy the armor or the portions and food which you use consistently in PvE and PvP. There was an option to donate to the guild within this build of the game, however there's nothing that could be done with it, which made the system seem kind of pointless. This could be because it's connected to a system they've scrapped while developing the game, or it could be something that they're working on and we'll just have to wait and see which this is. So moving on to the world of Soterra, and I'm not going to jump too deep into it because we know the law's reach and that would just drag the video on. What we got to see was great. The open world really felt open to explore, and with the ability to climb within the game, you could get where you wanted to and you could get there quite easily. Even in small zones we had during the beta, it was quite large, and I would highly recommend getting them out as soon as you can, as it takes a while to get from place to place. However, there is a good fast travel system in the game which uses the bound stones, and once you've discovered a bound stone, you can use other bound stones to teleport back to it or back to the citadel. That means going back and forth between places is quite easy, and one thing I would say is that the button for citadel needs to be a bit more noticeable, as it kind of blends into the map and it doesn't even look like a button you can press unless you know about it. Now I actually found this out from one of Cannon's videos where he said about it, so it was a bit unusual, but I think a lot of people in my guild have the same issue. There was a great range of weather within the game, from normal weather to fog or rain. Sometimes when it's foggy, the lighting within the game was a bit intense and bright and blurry, and I think it's something they're experimenting with to give it that grungy horror gothic kind of vibe, but it definitely does need some work. I can't complain at all about the environments and graphics. I ran it all in Epic. It looks a lot better than most MMOs on the market, probably one of the best looking ones, even with people hating on it. Like, people are saying how amazing Ashes as a creation looks, and I'm not shitting on the game, but if you compare them next to each other, like Chrono Odyssey has it by the balls. Let's just be a bit honest with what we're saying, rather than just, oh, someone said this game's graphically awful, so I'll say it is. Actually, maybe get a new PC, upgrade to Epic or Cinematic or whatever, but the game wasn't that bad. I mean, I run on a decent PC, I got a 4070, so it's not the best, but for me and most of my guild, in fact all of my guild, I don't think anyone complained about the graphical fidelity or how it looked, so I'm not sure what's going on there. I don't think a lot of people are complaining about, you know, it being too heavy on the graphics cards. This is the future, you are gonna have to upgrade your PC, so yeah, I think that's a really redundant thing I'm seeing, and it's a bit annoying because it takes away from actual feedback that, you know, could be used better. And did it look like the trailers? No, obviously, but did I expect it to look like the trailers? No, it's a trailer to sell the game. If you're gonna criticize a game for not looking like the trailers, like a lot of other games do, a lot worse, and honestly, for the beta, the visuals were above expected. No wonder we don't have a lot of people taking MMO risks and making it in the genre now, because this is the type of MMO player base we have that really do go out the way to destroy a game before even giving it a chance, and then complain we've got no MMOs. Now I do want to talk about the group content. This was one area of the game I was looking forward to getting into, and honestly I just wish there'd been more of it, and I am hoping there will be more in future tests, as it was one of my favourite parts of the weekend. The Howling Pit was a 3-man dungeon which I jumped into with my guild members on the final day, and honestly it was a lot harder than I expected. We started it when we were level 15 and we weren't yet in full blue gear, and it took us a while to get through and many attempts at the final boss, but that was great and I was glad it was a challenge. Too many MMOs make dungeons way too easy, and I just don't feel the challenge, which means they're not very fun or rewarding to run through multiple times. But due to how difficult this was to run early game, it made it fun to rerun and see how we could do better with each subsequent run, and it also helped increase our combat skills and learn the game better. There was also a group quest that was not the easiest. It did include a tanky world boss. It made it fun to do with groups, however it wasn't the easiest to figure out what you actually had to do if the event it was tied to wasn't on. There was also a 3-man time portal, which was probably the worst of the multiplayer content, as once you'd done it once, it pretty much was the same each time you did it, and it didn't even feel like you'd want to repeat it if it wasn't for the fact you get different rewards each time you ran it. All in all, I thought it was an extremely good beta for the first go. I know there's going to be more, and it definitely was an MMO vibe to it, more so than I thought, and I'll also be setting up a main roster for the game. So if you're looking for the Chrono Odyssey guild, head over to our Discord, links in the description below, fill in the application, and if you're semi-hardcore, we are recruiting. I'm also gonna cover it a lot more on the channel, as I believe if they stick to what they've said, it could be a great MMO and has real potential. Let me know in the comments, what did you guys think about the beta? Do you think people are being too overcritical? Are you getting swayed because of some of the big content creators? As always, I really do appreciate you watching. I know this is a bit of a long one today, but give the video a share, give it a like, drop your comments down below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.